Hello, everybody, and welcome to the West Ham Way YouTube channel. You already know who I am. I'm joined by Morgan, a Fulham fan. This is part of our series on the new boys. Fulham are very much the new boys after their playoff final victory. So, Morgan, how are we today?
Good, yeah. Kind of anticipation is now building. We've had it's 2 weeks just over 2 weeks since we won the playoff final at Wembley, and it's sort of that first week afterwards is very euphoric, as with any playoff final win, especially against Brentford, obviously our local rivals. And now it's kind of getting more transitioning from the euphoria of going up to the business end of things in terms of signings back to pre-season, and then obviously the results. We'll get the fixtures imminently. They'll be out when this goes out. So yeah, we're looking forward to another attempt at the Premier League, because
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
the last one was such a shambles. Looking at this and going, okay, is this going to be? Have we learned from our mistakes? Is this going to be any better, or is it just going to be another, essentially disaster that it was last time?
Yeah, you know what? It is such an interesting strategy. Clubs coming up from the Championship. You see some like, particularly Sheffield United last year come up. Were very consistent with the squad members. Added a few. Obviously, Fulham come up a few seasons ago, and that was very much throw money at it and see what will work. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how Fulham approach it. So they've done well to obviously get promoted first time of asking, albeit through the playoffs. Is there any areas that you think really need strengthening in order for Fulham to compete next season?
I think our defence is not a big thing. We last season we started off with Alfie Mawson, Tim Ream, kind of starting at the back, and obviously Alfie Mawson has his fairly well publicised injury issues. Never really got back into the side, but we signed Michael Hector from Chelsea, basically about a few hours after the summer window closed. So we couldn't play until January. And he came in and he was an absolute rock. He changed how our defence played, shored things up. And we were the first time in a good few years, since probably the Hodgson days, we were good defensively. And that sort of really helped us sort of push up and resulting in going up. But we probably need a new partner for him. Tim Ream, who's been a great servant for the club, he's getting on a bit now. He's definitely past his best days, and there's rumours that he might be going back to the States. Probably need another right back. We've got a couple of options there, but are they Premier League quality? Probably not. So I think we'll be looking at strengthening there. In terms of goalkeepers, we've got a good young keeper called Marek Rodak, who came in about third of the way into the season last year, replacing Marcus Bettinelli, and he's been very good. But does he need a strong challenger? I think probably the case, and I don't think Bettinelli will hang around if he's just been told to stay on the bench. Attacking wise, we can possibly do with a backup striker to Mitrovic, because we rely far too heavily on him. And then we've got an abundance of wingers, but again, we could probably do with another quality one, and then maybe one more midfielder to bring into it.
So it sounded like a lot of money from.
We basically need a whole new team again. That's
Yeah.
Yeah.
With particularly with the fullbacks, obviously as a West Ham fan, we've had a few problems over the past seasons with that position. With Scott Parker's team, does he like his fullbacks to get forward quite a lot, or is he relying on them being quite defensively solid?
The way we play is very pass the ball around, not taking too many risks. That's why our possession stats are so high. I'm not sure how he's going to adapt it to the Premier League, because obviously it's a very different beast of a league compared to the Championship. Joe Bryan is a very attacking-minded left-back, whereas if we use Dennis Adoy on the right, he's very defensive-minded. But Cyrus Christie is another one who drives forward. So I think we're actually, the other option that we're bringing in apparently is Anthony Robinson from Wigan, who I think is set to sign. I know very little about him, but from what I hear, he's pretty attacking minded. So if that's setting the tone, I would say that they're probably going to use our fullbacks as potentially as wing backs if we go 5-3-2, which we have done in the past, or 4-4-2, try to have them sort of overlap with the wingers. But we'll see. You know, the style he played in the Championship, he might be looking to adapt to deal with the Premier League. So we shall. There could be some surprises on the horizon, I guess.
Yeah, do you know, it was interesting because I watched the playoff final. West Ham have obviously got a few transfer targets with Brentford. And I just wanted to see whether they go up. And obviously, you beat them. A great free kick from Brian. But it was interesting. Like, for me, it showed that Scott Parker can adapt his game plan in order to win games. And even though I felt that Brentford were the favourites coming in, you know, Fulham looked really defensively organised. Adoy, you were saying on the right, was told to kind of just stay defensive to kind of cover that wing from Ben Rama. So, you know, in all previews of Fulham that I've had, I've kind of said that I wouldn't be surprised if Scott Parker is able to switch it up in certain games. You know, he could play that back three with wing backs to sort of get forward and add a little bit more going forward as well. So it will be interesting to see what Scott Parker decides on next season.
I think one of the interesting things, and we've seen since obviously lockdown ended and we've been playing these behind closed door games, our style is very much suited to not having fans in the ground, because it's such a patient game. And when you're a fan in the stands and you see patient football being played, it's frustrating because you want them to get forward. You want to see positive passing. You don't want to see sideways passing or backward passing. And we controlled after the first two games, which were, you know, they weren't good. We lost both of them to Brentford and Leeds. We started getting our style right, and he was just controlling these games nicely. And we looked in trouble every now and then, but we had a sort of our foot on the ball the whole time. And I said, you know, this style is really suited to not having people in the ground getting on the players' backs because they may start doubting what they're doing. In this case, they were doing what the manager told them to do. And whilst the games may not have been particularly exhilarating to watch, they were very effective. And we were very close to actually just going up automatically. But it was the style that got us to the playoffs. And aside from it's like wobble against Cardiff in the second leg, we were pretty comfortable throughout all three games. So yeah, I think once fans start coming back into the ground, it'll be interesting to see if there's any change. But I think moving into the Premier League with this style and no fans getting on our backs because of the way we play, I think, you know, we could be a bit of a surprise.
It is tough. Like you have teams that. Like, I just did an interview with All Leeds TV, and you know, Leeds are very much, you know, bodies forward, you know, fast attacking football. And I think with possession-based football, it done well, it will take the pressure off. You know, you will be able to sort of sit deep in numbers and counter-attack and use a bit of that pace. But it's going to be hard because the Premier League is so, like when you're up against a Manchester City or a Liverpool, the pressing is just relentless. And I'm interested to see how Fulham will deal with that, whether Parker will have to switch it up or whether he'll keep very principled.
Yeah, I think the quality when you go from the Championship to the Premier League is exponentially better. You know, when you're playing the best teams in the Championship, it's nothing compared to playing the Man Cities, the Liverpools, the Premier League. So he's going to have to have done some pretty hard studying, I think, and drawing on as much of the experience around him as his own sort of experience, because he's still a young manager. And when he came into the job, he was very much thrown into it because Ranieri had been such a disaster in his role. We'd started off the season badly under Jokanovic, in our Premier League year. And he came into it because he had the respect of the players and they liked playing for him. And when we got to the Championship, everyone was there were two camps. There were the ones that were like, yeah, we hope he does well. But then there were other ones, and myself included, I wasn't confident that he was the right man because he was still so young and in a league where the games came, you know, hard and fast, especially after lockdown. We weren't quite sure if his inexperience was going to, you know, take its toll. And thankfully, we were all proved wrong. And although we took the hard route, you could tell the players had his back. They love playing for him. They respect him, and that really does sort of, you know, set the tone moving forward. If you do have the dressing room on side,
do you think with someone like Parker, obviously as a young manager, did it take a while for the team to get used to his tactics and the style of play that he wanted to play? And as a Fulham fan, did you did you have to go through that transition period before you really started to kick on?
Yeah, big time. But I think so when we went up to the Premier League, we had Slavisa Jokanovic as our manager. We went the whole second half up until the final game of the season in the Championship unbeaten, 23 games unbeaten, went up through the playoffs again. And we had such a shocker when we started the Premier League campaign. We bought in 100 million quid's worth of players, a bunch of loans, all sorts of things, and they just threw money at it. And there was no gelling in the team. There was no passion within it. And obviously, results go badly, the manager bites the dust, and he did. And they brought in Ranieri immediately. It was we sacked him, but we've hired him. And it was known, the chairman called it a no-risk appointment.
Right.
Turns out it was a massive risk. And his style just did not work for us. And then I think Parker coming in, the players were just happy to be playing a slightly more positive style. Even if it's not the most exciting, it was definitely a positive style. And the rest of the season didn't go well. We were still poor. We had, in the close season, we got rid of a lot of the dross from our team and kind of went back to a lot of the side that got us up season before. And we brought in a couple of players. We obviously got rid of Ryan Sessegnon to Spurs, but we brought in Josh Onoma in part exchange for him, who turned out he was an absolute godsend. He was brilliant. It took a little while to get used to the style, as many of the players did, but it was the players got more into the style quicker than the fans did, I think.
Right, okay. Yeah.
And there were times when the fans were getting on his back because they just didn't think it was the positive style of football that Fulham should be playing. Reality was that we were all comparing it to the style of Jokanovic in the season we got promoted, and it was a very different. Albeit we had the same few players, it was a very different team this time around. So I think we were judging him based on a style previously seen, whereas we should have just been watching the football and going, actually, it's not pretty, but it is getting us there.
I suppose as a Fulham fan, in particular the past season or so, where there's been a bit of managerial change and you've had to sort of adapt to different styles. Coming into the Premier League, are you very much like you just want to stay in the league, or do you want to see Fulham play attractive football?
I think last time round I predicted a 13th place finish. This time I would be happy with 17th. I look at the teams in the Premier League at the moment. I look at the teams that have come up, and I'm just thinking if we can be better than 3 of those teams, solidify our place this time around, and then build on it, then I'd be happy. I think from what you could tell from the way the recruitment was happening last time around, they were thinking that we should be top half straight off the bat. Now, we went down in 2013-14 after 13 years in the Premier League, and the league had changed a hell of a lot in the time that we were away. So I think this time around, if we're sensible and we can look at how our players that we have can be complemented by a few signings and just make sure that we keep pace with those mid-table sides rather than trying to achieve European football, but then I think that's a much more positive way of looking at it. If we do a Sheffield United, brilliant. I would look at Wolves as a good template for a team. But I just don't want to do something like, I just don't want to do what we did last time. But I also don't want to do what Norwich did. And they came up, they didn't spend any money. I think they spent £1 million or something. And then they pretty much went out with a whimper. So that's exactly what we don't want to do, but we don't want to do the other end of scale and do what we did. So we've got to find that sort of happy,
Yeah, of course. I think Villa, did well to stay in the league in the end, to be honest. I mean, people would argue that it's just a technicality that kept them up. They spent a lot of money and they didn't look great for long periods of time. They were losing a lot of games. In my opinion, they lucked out a little bit with someone like Jack Grealish, who was able to drag them through games. So it's really tough. And like you say, the last time, Fulham obviously got relegated after 14 years, come back, and it's all completely changed now. And, it's difficult. It really is. Even as West Ham, we spent a lot of money, relatively speaking, over the past 2 seasons, bringing Anderson, Allaire, and and we still haven't really pushed on. And for me, I think a lot of teams, it's not about the money you spend, it's about the identity and the continuity. You know, you see from Wolves, albeit I know Wolves have the super agent, you know, George Mendes and all these things, but you know, they've kept relatively the same team, you know, and they've done well in the Europa League and in the Premier League. So I think for Fulham to succeed next season is about being consistent. And I'm interested to see if results don't go Fulham's way, whether they'll stick with Scott Parker, because before they, you know, made the change and hope for the best. Do you think they'll stick with Scott if things go a bit awry?
Well, what we're saying about Villa, one of the things I felt was, you know, I was a big fan of Villa. I mean, obviously got John Terry on the staff. No one likes him. Unless you're Chelsea fan.
Yeah, of course.
But one thing I did sort of respect was the fact they kept the faith with Dean Smith through the whole season. They didn't make any rash changes. They kept the faith, and eventually it paid off. The year we went down in 2014, we sacked Martin Jol in whenever it was, October, November. We brought in René Meulenstein, which was Alex Ferguson's assistant, but he had like two other managers. He had Alan Kirbishley and Ray Wilkins behind him. So we kind of had three managers. And then when, you know, shockingly, that didn't work out, they brought in a guy called Felix Magath, who was this crazy German who looked a bit like Penfold from Danger Mouse. And he was a nutter. I mean, absolute nutter. And not even one of those good nutters. He was just, he was just awful. And, you know, that season petered out. We went down. And we kind of did the same last time round. We had two managerial changes again, and again we went out. And I think the Kahns, Tony Khan, who is the chairman's son, is our director of football, and he's head of our recruitment, and he divides opinion quite heavily. He needs to look at that when he's making his judgment calls throughout the season. Does he think, you know, a rash managerial change is going to work at third time of asking, or sixth time of asking, or whatever we're at? Or do you just go and say, Scott, you've got the whole season. We're right behind you. You've got the team, you know, make sure that you keep the dressing room on board. And if that's the case, regardless of the results, I think we need to keep faith with him, because he is a young manager. He's becoming increasingly well respected in the media, which is, you know, obviously in British football, that's where you're judged the harshest. And I think if we can just stick with him, I think we've got a better chance than if we were, you know, bottom after 15 games and then trying to sort of just change it up and bringing in, you know, whoever, some journeyman manager. So I think whilst optimistically, I'd say, yes, keep the faith. You never really know anything in this game. So that's
completely. Yeah, we had the same with Pellegrini. You know, he spent a lot of money, and I think we saw a sort of upturn in our style in that season, albeit I think we actually underperformed given the money we'd spent, and we obviously didn't kick on, unfortunately, last season. And there was a period of time where it was like, do you stick with him or don't you? And to be honest, like, you never really know until you're in that position. You know, I was very much like Pellegrini, let's give him the time, but it got so bad in the end that even I was saying, you know, he should have been sacked earlier, because yeah, it's such a lucrative league, the Premier League. And, you know, for someone like Fulham as well, you know, you're up and down sometimes, and you need that money in order to push on. That's why I asked the question whether it's like, do we bring someone in that we know can keep us in the league, or do we stick with someone like Scott, who's clearly talented, clearly done well at this stage? And then if we go down, can we bounce back up again? And that's the big question.
I think one of the things was last time we were in the Premier League and we had Jukanovic, his relationship with the board was so bad. I mean, they barely talked to each other, really. Yeah. And he didn't like the style of Tony Khan, director of football. Didn't like how he was doing business, or how he felt ignored. He was having bust-ups with other people behind the scenes. And I don't think Scott has had any of those issues. I think he's come into it with a fairly open mind. He knows this is his first managerial job. He knows how the club is run because he's been there since 2013, you know, with a year or so break when he went to Spurs as a coach. But he knows how the Khans want to run the club. And I think that makes a difference. I think he has a good working relationship with Tony Khan, and that could see it sort of, you know, a stronger relationship. So whereas I think Khan was probably very glad to see the back of Jokanovic, really,
Right,
despite the playoff success the year before.
It's tricky, isn't it? With managers and boards. We know better than anyone else with the manager and the board. We're currently in a transfer window where David Moyes needs certain signings, and it doesn't appear that we're getting the right sort of notion from the board to suggest we can afford them. So it's going to be a tough one. I kind of want to touch on some of your key players that I've noticed. Obviously, you've mentioned Michael Hector. He's had quite a varied career. He's been here, there, and everywhere, and by the sounds of it, he seems to have settled at Fulham and looks to push on next season.
What was good about him was that because we signed him after the transfer window closed, he actually came and trained with us from the beginning of September. So he knew the team inside out before he actually played a game. So that was good. That was positive. Because if you get a centre back who you sign, he's thrown straight in the team, may not know who he's playing with. This time around, he was in every training session. He probably would have been at the games. And he was able to gel in immediately. So I think that was a good thing. But he, coming off the back of being loaned out by Chelsea, umpteen times, as you would do if you're a Chelsea player. I didn't realise he was like 27 years old.
Yeah, I know, crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, he'll be a good player for us. I think, as I said, we could do with having someone else with him at centre back. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him in the Premier League.
Yeah, no, I've definitely got my eye on him. I definitely think he could do a good job. Very physical, seems quite comfortable on the ball as well. So he could make that step up quite easily. Another player that I think is quite a good player is Tom Cairney. Tom Cairney's very, he reminds me a little bit of Michael Carrick, a little bit, very good, a good passer of the ball. But some of his forward passing as well is really impressive.
So this is an interesting one because he's been our captain for about 4 years now. There's been a sort of fairly solid belief that he was given the captaincy in order to stop him leaving, as opposed to him being a particularly influential player. But he's had his injury problems. He's had an ankle injury a couple of years ago, and from watching him play, it never really looked like he recovered properly. So whilst he was influential in us going up in 2018, he hasn't been the same player in recent times. In the playoffs, actually, just gone, he was brilliant and he really stepped up his game. But we just haven't really seen the same Tom Cairney that we had in the past. And there was chatter on fans, would he be in the starting 11 for the playoffs? Never mind next season. Excuse me. So it'll be interesting what role he plays. But he could actually, given that his sharpness may not be quite as it was, may see him dropping slightly back, in a potentially Carrick-esque role. That would also depend on who we sign. If we sign Harrison Reed from Southampton on a permanent, if we bring back Frank Zambo-Anguissa from Villarreal, who's a holding midfielder, and let Josh Onomah play the role that Tom Cairney was used to playing. So I think he'll still have a part to play because he is our club captain and he is a decent player, but he isn't the player that we expected to see when we went up last time. So fingers crossed he'll have a great season, but he's certainly not the first name of the team sheet anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting because I do remember when he came up to the Premier League, he was playing slightly more advanced. And when I watched the playoff final, he was sitting quite deep and sort of supporting the back two and sort of spraying the passes and just keeping the tempo. Kind of Harrison Reed putting in the work and quite a mobile midfield, which is important in the league as well. You've got to be athletic and yeah.
He's more of the conductor of the orchestra now rather than the main focus of it. So I think if he can work out what his best role is, then that would be the key thing for him to do, because it's not the role he was 3 years ago. So.
It's difficult, mate. You see so many players out there. Best example might be Mark Noble for us. For years and years he was very box to box and got forward and put the tackles in. And obviously now as he's got a bit older, he can't play the same game. So Moyes at the moment's got him in a sort of strange number 10 position where he gives him the freedom to press, which has worked for him. So Cairney could undergo the same type of treatment where he's just told to sit and spray the passes and use his abilities.
Yeah. No, it'll be interesting to see anyway.
Yeah, and then we've got Alexander Mitrovic. We've got a lot of interest in Mitrovic. Mitrovic would be a perfect West Ham player. Unfortunately, I don't think he's going to go because he's so pivotal to the way you play, and he scores goals in the Premier League and in the Championship.
Yeah, I mean, without him, we wouldn't have gone up last season. He may not be, the most influential player every game we play, but he scored 26 goals last year. Without those goals, we don't go up. I think it was just under 50% of our goals were scored by Mitro last year. I mean, that's a ridiculous number for a team to. It's a ridiculous number for a player to score, but it's also far too overly reliant on one player to do that. And in fact, when he didn't play, our record was really good. And I can't remember how many games he didn't play, but at one point it was 6 out of 7 games he hadn't played, we won. Because we weren't so heavily reliant on him putting it back in the net. And I think, obviously, his role is so key to us, getting 3 points because, he scores the goals. But we can play without him. And that's why I think we need a backup striker who we aren't quite as heavily reliant on. So whether we take a chance on a young up-and-coming player or whether we bring in someone who's a bit more of a journeyman striker.
Yeah.
But we've got a guy called Abubakar Kamara, who he's a bit like a bull in a china shop. He's built like a brick shit house. He'll run all day. His shooting can be a bit wayward, but he really puts in a shift. And he's currently our backup striker. And also Bobby Reed, who...
Oh, yeah.
He is. But yeah, I think we need someone with a bit of quality who can. He's not going to challenge Mitro for a starting place because that's his.
Yeah.
But we can certainly have someone in there who can be a decent addition to the front three if we play that way, but not someone that everything needs to go through. And that's kind of how we rely on Mitro. So yeah, we'll. One thing, obviously, we sort of. People have been picking up on is how's VAR going to treat Mitro this season? And his record is great. I mean, people pick up on his disciplinary issues when he was at Newcastle, when he gets sent off like 3 times in his first 2 games or something. And he's just like he's a bit rough and tumble, but he's never been sent off for us. Against Leeds, he got a retrospective 3 games.
Yeah, that's it.
And in the playoff final, he came on and he chokeslammed one of the Brentford players. But that was perfect. But in the eyes of VAR, maybe they'll pick up on a few things. He could see he may have to sort of brush up on his temperament.
Yeah, that's a massive point because if he does sort of lose his head in any game, and Fulham will be under the cosh in some games. And if he does that and you lose him, you're going to have to get someone in that's going to replace his goals or, support the team in a similar way. So it definitely looks like an area that you're going to have to invest in.
Yeah, and I think, we will bring someone in. We've been linked with a couple of people, although we seem to have been linked with every position but a striker at the moment. So there's rumours that Ryan Babel might come back. So if we brought him in, then he would probably be that player. But we shall. We'll see. We'll see who we get. Who's a disciplinary cover for Mitro.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I was sort of alluded to with the playoff final, I saw Josh Onomah playing quite an advanced role. I mean, what is his natural position? Is he an attacking midfielder or does he play striker occasion? What is his? What's his
I think
role?
he's still trying to work it out. To be honest, he came in. He was playing a bit deeper at first, and then he was playing more of a number 10. I think it's probably more of a number 10. I think someone suggested that he play on the right, but he's not a winger. So I think if he plays behind whoever's playing up top, that's probably his best role. I mean, the ball at his feet, he's an absolute beast. You probably saw his goal against Cardiff in the first leg. And he's got great feet as well. So I think if he can start working more to perfect that position, then I think that's where we'll see him. But I wouldn't want him as the old false 9 role.
Yeah, it's interesting though because he's a big lad and he's physical as well. So he kind of offers that versatility. You know, you never know in the Premier League. Obviously, like you say, if Mitro gets suspended for 3 games, you know, he could come in maybe and do that job. You know, who knows?
I'm sure at some point, you know, we'll be on the end of a couple of hammerings, and then there'll be some weird sort of tactical decisions somewhere just to try and mix it up a bit. But yeah.
Yeah, cool. So I'm gathering you're very excited about the Premier League. You know, albeit you're not too sure about what will happen. Is there any games in particular you're excited about?
I'm trying to think. I guess I think it'd be quite fun the when we play Villa again. You know, we've got a bit of history with them because of the playoff final.
Yeah.
That's always quite a fun one. I think if Man City were to sign Messi, and we were able to, you know, get back into the ground, I think seeing Messi play in the Premier League would be quite something. But I think just generally, look, I'm just looking forward to getting sort of, you know, seeing the players come up, you know, testing themselves at the highest level again. I was so excited last time we went up because I thought the football we were playing, the team we had, the signings at the time, when we saw who was coming in, we're like, yeah, no, he's great, you know. And then we brought in Timothy Fosu-Mensah from Man U, like, yeah, no, he's great.
Yeah.
Things like that, and we're just like, this time around, we're a little bit more level-headed about it, and I think we just really want to sort of see us, you know, go into these games with a bit more optimism than we did last time. I think in terms of other games to look forward to, I'd definitely say the London derbies. I love a London derby. You know, it's be Chelsea, be even you guys on the other side of London.
Against Fat Frank, of course.
Yeah. So I think it's still going to be weird, isn't it? Because we're still watching them on TV.
Yeah.
And even with the FIFA crowd noise playing in the background, it's still not the same. And I think once we can get back into the grounds, it'll become a little bit more real. Because I think for the last few months, everything everywhere has been surreal, and football's no different. And so I'm looking forward to, you know, finally getting back into a ground. And even if we're playing, you know, Southampton at home, that's going to be exciting. Or Burnley away, the thrill of going to Burnley. Yeah,
yeah, I bet. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, I think we'll as soon as the gates open up, that's when the excitement can really begin. But for now, it's kind of it feels a bit more sort of feels a bit more like business as opposed to pleasure.
Yeah, you know, we've even seen it, you know, after Project Restart in the Premier League, teams, the way they're able to play their game, and you alluded to it obviously with Scotty Parker and, you know, a few games where there's no fan pressure, and some teams just do better under that. You know, we saw Manchester City did unbelievably well when there was no fans. So, yeah,
which is before lockdown or after lockdown?
After lockdown, fell apart a little bit, but no, do you know what I mean? The league's a bit different. You know, teams can impose themselves on games, and I actually think, you know, West Ham did slightly better when there wasn't that level of fan pressure, because, you know, if you're in a relegation battle or you're struggling and there's all the fans there, you know, some players just don't deal with that, and then the team struggles as a whole.
But then on the flip side, there are certain players that, you know, flair players that rely on people watching them and cheering their name.
Yeah.
And I think for the teams coming up, I think going to away grounds where they could have been fairly intimidating in the past, if there are no fans there, I think they'll be able to compete on more of a even playing field than they would have been if they were, say, going to Anfield and, you know, getting intimidated by, you know, everyone around them. Although you'd think being professional footballers playing at a relatively high level beforehand, they'd be all right. But I think there's still that sort of mental aspect that goes into it. Yeah, I think there'll be some interesting results, I think, being kicked up, be it by Leeds, West Brom, or ourselves, to start things off.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is potentially the 3 most competitive teams we've seen actually come into the division in a long time. You know, West Brom played some good stuff with Slaven Bilic. You know, yourselves with Scott Parker, Leeds as well with Bielsa, and I think the league's going to be really competitive next season. So teams are going to be, you know, where this season maybe they found themselves in 12th, 13th place. They're really going to have to recruit well this summer and perform from minute go. Otherwise, they could struggle.
I mean, I look at Leeds and they have a bit of a feel style-wise of Fulham when we went up 2 seasons ago. very attacking, very easy on the eye to watch. And that didn't work out so well for us because teams picked us off. So I mean, I'm sure they know better than I do, but their recruitment is going to have to be very clever. So I think from a player looking to join a new team, I think Leeds are an attractive proposition, as well Fulham are, I think. But they're going to have to be careful of the pitfalls of playing the style of football that got them promoted from the Championship against some of these Premier League teams, because it will be bread and butter to a lot of Premier League defenders. And, some counter-attacking sides, especially someone like Leicester, who attack so quickly, that's the kind of team they'll look at and go, there are big spaces opening up here. And that's exactly what happened to us first time around. Teams just found the gaps and exploited them very, very easily. So I think that's where we're in a different position this time around, because we allow fewer gaps. We do have to work on some of our defensive positioning, especially in the fullback areas, but we're a much more solid proposition than we were in 2018.
Yeah, it's crazy because like when I was at All These TV, I brought this up and I said obviously Bielsa's going to attack with numbers. There's albeit I think they'll score a lot of goals against some weaker teams. They could concede quite a lot as well, but they're very much like, we'll just take it in our stride because we know the way we play and they enjoy it so much. So that's why I asked the question. Do you go for style over substance? It's one of those debates, isn't it?
And I having had that very harsh lesson last time around, I think I'm much more of the by any means necessary this time around. Try to be much more sort of, look at it with a straight face as opposed to sort of, it's Premier League again. Woohoo! We're going to get into Europe first time around and things like that. But I think we will go in there. We'll give ourselves a much better account this time. And I hope, fingers crossed, that we've learnt lessons from last time. And if we haven't, then there needs to be a very big shake-up at the end of the season, because clearly people aren't doing their jobs properly.
Right. Brilliant, Morgan. Thank you very much. I enjoyed that, hearing about your promotion hopes next season. I wish you all the best, other than when you play West Ham twice. So thanks for coming on. And until next time, everybody, take care.